Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and today it's time for another top 10. And this top 10 is for Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburgher, more famously known as The Archers. Now, The Archers, Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburgher made films in the 30s, 40s, 50s. Michael Powell started in silent films, and then he met Emmerich Pressburgher and they formed their own production company and they became The Archers. And their fairly unique credit before the start of the films was written, directed and produced by Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburgher, which is fairly unique. And their collaboration was ahead of their time. Most of their films were never appreciated at the time of their release, and it wasn't really until the 80s where people like Martin Scorsese, who watched their films growing up on black and white television, usually in truncated form, fell in love with their films, and then he obviously had the power at that point to actually look at restoring them. Scorsese became friends with Michael Powell during the last years of his life, and Scorsese's long-time editor, Thelma Schoonmaker, was married to Michael Powell. Yeah, as we'll go through these films, the one thing you will kind of notice is just the fact how far ahead of their time they were. They kind of started making propaganda films during World War II, but even those propaganda films were so ahead of their time in the sense the scripts by Pressburgher were just so adult and so ambiguous and so intelligent, and their partnership was kind of unique because also Michael Powell was this quintessential English gentleman, but he kind of had, kind of a dark side to him. And Emmerich Pressburgher was a Hungarian immigrant, so he kind of saw Englishness and Britishness, its good points and also its kind of pomposity and its kind of sometimes overly strict adherence to rules. So it was just a perfect combination of the two of them, and also they had cinematographer Jack Cardiff for a lot of their films. So the films just look amazing. The scripts are amazingly ahead of their time. I mean, there was times in the 40s and 50s post-war where a lot of filmmakers were doing kind of drab kitchen sink dramas, and Powell and Pressburgher were just doing magnificent, opulent Technicolor spectaculars that were just, they're a sight to behold. And if you've never seen a Powell and Pressburgher film, and if you're intrigued by any films that I talk about on this list, then you're in for a treat. Hopefully I can speak eloquently enough on them and try and do them justice. So without further ado, let's do number 10. And this is A Canterbury Tale, which I just have on DVD. It is available on Criterion DVD, and hopefully they will release a Blu-ray version of that at some point. That would be ideal. And this is another film set during World War II, and it's kind of set in a small English town, and it's the relationship between British and American armed forces, and there's a a nuisance running about pouring glue on the hair of women who date American GIs. And it is a lovely little film. There is one shot that is amazing, because if you know film 2001 by Kubrick, there's a shot of, at the start when the ape throws the bone in the air and it cuts to a spaceship. Well, Michael Powell did it in a Canterbury Tale like 20 years earlier, 25 years earlier, and he does it with a hawk, and it's a quick cut and it becomes a Spitfire. But nobody seems to mention that cut, even though it's the exact same cut that Kubrick used. Again, I would maybe say it's one of their minor films, but it's still fantastic. It might not necessarily be the first film I would say to people to check out, but it's certainly worth having. Well, all the films are worth having. Sadly, there's a couple that you can't actually get. But that's number 10, A Canterbury Tale. Number 9 is The Small Backroom, and this is the Criterion DVD. And again, this is a black and white film set during the war, and this stars David Farrar as a bomb disposal expert, who likes a drink now and again. And there's a great kind of scene with a forced perspective use of a bottle. That doesn't make any sense, but it will when you actually watch the film. And again, this is kind of a smaller piece. Thankfully, David Farrar doesn't wear shorts at any point. I'll get back to that later. Again, it's got some nice set pieces in it, but it's not the full kind of Archer's experience quite yet. This was actually 1949, so this was kind of in between some of their more colourful pictures, so this is a smaller film by their standards, but it is a fantastic little film, and the Criterion DVD is a nice print, and again, hopefully one day they'll release it in Blu-ray. So number 8 is The 49th Parallel. This is a French Blu-ray that I managed to find, and this is a great wee film. Again, it's one of their war films. It's set in 1940, and it's about a bunch of German soldiers who end up on the coast of Canada and have to work their way across the country to get rescued. And again, this is one of the traits of Powell Pressburgher's war films. The Germans are maybe not viewed sympathetically, but they're not viewed as cartoonish, villains. They are kind of portrayed as like real people and real human beings. Laurence Olivier has a role as a French trapper with quite an outrageous accent, but even he has one of the best lines in the film, and it's just a really good rip-roaring adventure, and it's all about the kind of the clash of ideologies between wanting to express yourself and the kind of glories of art compared with the ethos of the Nazis. So again, maybe not one of their major works, but it is a tremendously enjoyable little film. Number 7 is A Matter of Life and Death, or in the US it was released as A Stairway to Heaven, because post-war American cinemas were a little bit sensitive about using the word death in their films, because this was 1946. This was made again as a propaganda film. Powell and Pressburgher were told to go away and make a film to bolster American and British military feelings for each other, and of course they came up with this utterly amazing and dazzling colour and black and white film. It stars David Niven as an airman who is supposed to die, but the messenger from heaven misses him in the fog. And the rest of the film is heaven trying to get him back and him trying to stay on Earth as he's fallen in love with Kim Hunter. And this is an example, really one of those Powell and Pressburgher films that they're famous for. So it switches between colour and black and white, and the transition from colour and black and white is absolutely breathtaking, and it really has to be seen to be believed. This was shot by Jack Cardiff, and the Technicolor is just amazing. This is a really nice print. Criterion's done a good job, and the extras are really good. There's an interview with Scorsese, who's probably the biggest champion of Michael Powell and Pressburgher films, and there's a really good interview with Thelma Schoonmaker, who was Michael Powell's wife, which is actually quite moving, and it gives an insight into the making of it. She even tells us what the name of the stairway to heaven was called during the production. Again, it is an amazing film. It's not one of my favourites, even though it's still pretty much a masterpiece. That just shows you how good they are, that this is only number 7. David Niven gives a fantastic performance. Roger Livesley, who's a Powell and Pressburgher regular, is fantastic in it as well, as the doctor who makes the ultimate sacrifice to help David Niven's character out. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to give too much of it away, because if you've never seen it, you're in for a treat. This is a relatively recent release from Criterion, so I would urge you to go out and get it, because it's just a fantastic film. So number 6 is probably more of a personal favourite than a great film. I would say it's probably a flawed masterwork, and that's the Tales of Hoffman. This is the Studio Canal Blu-ray, and I also have it on Criterion DVD. And this is based on Offenbach's opera, and it's just amazing. I mean, this is 1951, and again, this was kind of the start of the kitchen sink drama in Britain, whereas Powell and Pressburgher just did, let's do musical opera films, let's just do lavish productions, Technicolor masterpieces. Again, this isn't perfect, but there are moments of absolute genius in it. It's about Hoffman, who is unlucky in love, and we see him as 3 ages with 3 adventures with women who he loses. The last episode is probably the weakest, but the one set in Venice and the one with Moira Shearer as a doll is just absolutely amazing, and the ending's wonderful. It looks amazing, it sounds amazing. Originally this was, like a lot of Powell and Pressburgher films, this was cut on release, but again it was fully restored in the 80s. Well, I think it was actually longer than that. I actually saw this in the theatres when it was restored and re-released, which was awesome. Again, this has the Studio Canal version has an interview with Scorsese and Thelma Schoonmaker as well. And again, maybe not the first Powell and Pressburgher film I would recommend to people, but it's certainly one you've just got to see for its moments of absolute genius. So that's number 6. Number 5 is I Know Where I'm Going. Again, this is available on Criterion DVD. and again, hopefully they release a Blu-ray of that at some point. And this is a great wee film set in the north of Scotland. That's another little detail about Michael Powell. He was this prototypical English gentleman, but he loved the Scottish Highlands. And the music from this film was actually played at his funeral at his behest. And again, it's about a woman who is set to be married to somebody, and she goes up to the north of Scotland and kind of meets somebody else, and it's lyrical. There's lots of water and rocks and sea and trees and grass, and it's eagles, the animal, not the band, and it's just an enchanting little film. And again, Powell Pressburgher's editing the transitions between scenes, the characters, the script, which again is just ahead of its time, and it is a great little film, and hopefully coming to Blu-ray soon, so that's how I know where I'm going. Number 4 is more a personal favourite. This is The Spy in Black. This is a DVD. I do have a French Blu-ray, but I believe that's actually slightly cut. This is a perfect example of Powell Pressburgher kind of playing with conventions and not making the audience feel the way they're supposed to feel. This stars Conrad Veidt as a Nazi U-boat captain whose job it is to meet up with a German spy in the north of Scotland to scupper some ships before they head out to sink some German ships. And it's fantastic because as the film goes on, you do actually root for Conrad Veidt's character, which obviously at the time was fairly controversial. Not that you're on his side, but you certainly root for him and you actually empathise with him when things don't necessarily go his way. So again, it's just another perfect example of the way Pressburgher's scripts were just way ahead of their time, and people just weren't doing films like this. But again, it's maybe not their greatest film, but it certainly is a personal favourite, and that's why it's so high at number 4. But it's just an excellent little film, and you should really try and check it out. Now, number 3, these are pretty much, could all be number 1. Number 3 is The Red Shoes. This is Blu-ray by ITV Studios, and this is the DVD on Criterion. I'm assuming that most of you will know about The Red Shoes, or have heard about The Red Shoes, or seen The Red Shoes. If you haven't, this is a film about ballet. But don't let that put you off, because it's about more than ballet. It's really about the sacrifices for art, how far you'd actually go for art, how far you'd go to achieve your dreams, and again the sacrifices you have to make to perform your art. As with most of their Technicolor films, it's amazing to look at. The script's ahead of its time as usual. The production design is just stunning. The choreography, Robert Helpman, Moira Shearer has never been better. It's just an absolute joy. And again, the things that Powell does with the camera are just amazing. And again, I can't really do these films justice and about talking to them. You just have to see them, preferably on the biggest screen you possibly can. Yeah, it's a masterpiece. Again, don't be put off by it's a film about ballet, because it's not really a film about ballet. The Red Shoes at number 3. Number 2 is the film Churchill tried to ban, believe it or not, and this is The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. This is Blu-ray, and this is the Criterion DVD, which you can get on Criterion Blu-ray. And again, it's one of their masterpieces. Yeah, Churchill tried to get it banned because it does kind of question Britishness, and it questions the British military mentality. It follows a character, Colonel Blimp, through several wars, up to World War II. And again, it's just... Again, I can't do it justice. Again, when it was released, nobody understood it. Churchill wanted it banned. It was heavily cut, and for years it was forgotten about in its cut form. And again, Scorsese and others were involved in restoring it. And this Blu-ray print is one of the best prints you'll ever see. It's absolutely gorgeous. And again, production design is amazing. The Technicolor is absolutely beautiful, and the script is so far ahead of the time. Anton Walbrook gives an amazing speech. He plays a German soldier that Roger Leslie's character, Colonel Blimp, kind of crosses paths with throughout his life. And he gives an amazing speech about why he should stay in Britain after the Second World War, or during the Second World War. Yeah, again, I'm doing a terrible job of doing justice to these films. But again, if you've never seen The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, please buy it and watch it, because it's such a great film. Yeah, I mean, I think at some point I will actually do kind of individual reviews for films rather than just doing top 10s, and hopefully I'll be able to articulate better about this film, because it's truly one of the best films you'll ever see. But that's only number 2. That's how good Powell and Pressburgher are. And for me, the number 1 Powell and Pressburgher film is Black Narcissus. Now, not only is this the number 1 Powell and Pressburgher film, it's the number 1 nun film. I don't have a top 10 nun film, but this would be number 1 anyway. And this is the Blu-ray, which is a lovely print. This is about nuns in India. That does sound fantastic, doesn't it? But it is. And this is the film with David Farrar in shorts, and he drives the nuns wild because he's got shorts on. This stars Deborah Kerr in a fantastic performance, and the nuns basically go to the Himalayas, which actually was all shot in a studio, which is mind-blowing. And again, production design, Technicolor, Jack Cardiff shot it, and it's absolutely ravishing. And this edition actually has a commentary with Michael Powell and Martin Scorsese, which is fantastic, and a documentary with Jack Cardiff. So it's pretty much a bunch of English nuns go to the Himalayas and get caught up in the exoticness of it, and David Farrar shorts, and slowly go native, which again doesn't sound that exciting, but it's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, just one of the greatest films ever made, and everybody's in top form. And again, can't do it justice unless you actually watch it. So please let me know in the comments below how many of these films you've actually seen and what you think of them. and that's number 1 in the Powell Pressburgher top 10. However, I do have another film to talk about, and this was made by Michael Powell himself in 1960. It was the film that critics absolutely hated because, again, it was ahead of its time. It was a film that pretty much ended his career. He had to go to Australia to make films after this. One famous critic said that it should be flushed down the toilet, and only after his death did she actually apologise and say that she was wrong about it, which wasn't really much help to Michael Powell. And this is Peeping Tom. This is the Criterion DVD, and this is the Blu-ray. And again, this is going to appear on quite a few top 10 lists, and again, what a film. Again, in some parts it's aged with the language and, you know, talking about amounts of money and things like that, but the actual core of the film is still relevant. When you consider this was made the same year as Psycho, personally, I mean, this is 100 times better than Psycho. It was ahead of its time because you actually empathise with the lead character, who is pretty much a sociopath. Carl Boehm gives a wonderful performance, a wonderfully wounded performance, as a man who scoptophilia likes to watch. And again, I'm trying not to spoil things for people who haven't seen it. But if you haven't seen it, go out and buy it now and watch it immediately. Yeah, so we actually feel empathy for the lead character, who we're not supposed to. We're supposed to see him as a monster. You know, in quote normal films, he would just be a monster and we just can't wait for him to get his comeuppance. But in this, you root for him. He's the product of a scientific father who did experiments on him about fear and terror. So again, it brings up the question of, are sociopaths or psychopaths made, or are they born? It's just such a complex film as far as the ideas in it, and again, so ahead of its time, and that's why it was so cruelly punished. Whereas now it's restored in all of its glory, and it is literally perfect. So again, I'll be doing a kind of ultimate list, and however big that is, this will be on it, and it's probably in like my top 20 films of all time, even though my top 20 films probably have about 50 films in them. Yeah, so cheating slightly, because this isn't a Powell and Pressburgher film, it's just Michael Powell. His partnership with Pressburgher had ended. And yes, this will appear on other film lists, but this is so impressive. So whenever people ask me, or people are talking about the greatest British film director of all time, for me it's not David Lean, it's not Carol Reed, it's certainly not Hitchcock, it's Michael Powell, who sadly was maybe not appreciated at the time he made these films, but now he's certainly regarded in the high esteem he should be, for creating at least 5 or 6 absolute masterpieces with the help of his partner Emmerich Pressburgher, who they probably wouldn't have achieved the greatness on their own, but combined they are pretty much the best collaborators in film history. So thank you very much for watching. I apologise for not really being able to express how amazing these films are, but I do urge you to check them out. And if you liked this video, please leave a like, leave any comments, let me know how many of these films you've seen and what order you would put your top 10 in. And subscribe if you like to see some more videos, and we will see you again. This is the Solitary Ronin saying thank you very much for watching and have a good night.